U.S. Marshals arrested young boy, accusing him of jumping out of a vehicle and shooting at a group of people on a South Baton Rouge street. He was facing 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder, but ended up pleading guilty to a reduced charge of aggravated assault with a firearm. He was given a 10-year suspended prison sentence and 3 years probation. Fast forward to 2019, while he was still on probation, young boy was involved in a shooting in Miami. Someone inside of an SUV shot at young boy, injuring the rapper's girlfriend at the time, killing a bystander. Young boy allegedly shot back. His charges for the actual shooting, though, were dismissed, but he violated a special condition of his probation. He wasn't supposed to be spending time with these 2 specific individuals who were connected to the Baton Rouge shooting, but he was. So for that, he had to spend 90 days in jail and the rest of his probation on house arrest. 2020, prosecutors indicted young boy and 15 other people on weapons charges after they filmed a music video in a vacant lot in Baton Rouge. A warrant was issued for young boy's arrest, and he was eventually taken into custody in California. He's facing federal firearms charges. Then in 2021, something interesting happened. While he was locked up in Louisiana, again on these federal firearms charges, he and his lawyers asked the judge if he could be released on house arrest and moved to a property in the Salt Lake City area. He had apparently spent time in Utah as a child through a youth outreach program. He had grown close with what he called his adoptive family there. According to courtroom testimony, his attorneys believed that the move would help keep him out of trouble, and the U.S. District Court judge allowed it. Now, it hasn't been easy. No, recently his lawyers filed papers suggesting that young boy had been suffering from anxiety, depression, weight, sleep loss. First of all, the probable cause affidavit starts with almost 3 full pages showing a list of charges: possession of a dangerous weapon, pattern of unlawful activity, 20 counts of identity fraud, 20 counts of procuring or attempting to procure any prescription, 20 counts of forgery, possession of a controlled substance. Now, the affidavit states that the Cache County Sheriff's Office started investigating a large prescription fraud ring that they believed young boy was a part of. In fact, they labeled him the target of the investigation, meaning this is the person who authorities are gathering evidence against to charge with a crime. The ring had reportedly been trying to get various medications, but specifically with a cough suppressant that's not only a controlled substance, but is also heavily. Okay, we start off with September 19th, 2023, and pay attention to the progression of time here. So it says, Reed's Pharmacy in Hiram received a prescription call-in for a Bethel White with a claimed date of birth in 1949. The prescription was called in by an individual who will be further referred to as the suspect, claiming to be a physician in the Provo, Utah area, providing an actual valid DEA number, NPI number, and other identification for the real physician. Reed's Pharmacy discovered that the phone number that the suspect called in from was a phone number that was not the same as the clinic in the Provo area. Reed's Pharmacy contacted the actual physician, and the actual physician informed employees of Reed's Pharmacy that he does not have a patient by the name of Bethel White, nor did he call in a prescription to a pharmacy in Hiram. The actual physician told pharmacy employees that this has, quote, happened several times today, and that they did not write any prescriptions for a Bethel White. Law enforcement staged in the parking lot of the Reed's Pharmacy awaiting someone to show up to retrieve the prescription, but no suspect showed up. Now, I got to say, good on the pharmacy employees for taking the time to look a little bit further into this. I think it's part of their job anyway, but it sounds like whoever called it in had all of the right identifying information, so it might not be too much of a leap to think that someone might have just filled it and moved on. Okay, so again, September 19, 2023, Spence's Pharmacy in Logan received a phone call from the suspect using the same physician's information, calling in a prescription for a Gwendolyn Cox with a claimed date of birth in 1951. Look at the ages here. The prescription was for similar to the prescription called in to Reed's Pharmacy. About 2 weeks after the prescription had been called in, the prescription had been picked up by a female individual who will be referred to as Associate 2. The affidavit goes on to state, Associate 2 picked up the prescription for Gwendolyn and alleged that Gwendolyn was her grandmother. Later on, October 9th, 2023, Spence's Pharmacy received another call from the suspect identifying as the same physician, again trying to prescribe to Gwendolyn Cox. However, the pharmacist requested that they send a hard copy of the prescription with the patient this time, and the suspect hung up the phone. At this time, employees of Spence's Pharmacy attempted to call the real physician back after looking up his phone number for a practice in Provo. Contact was made with the real physician, and he told them that he had not called in any prescriptions and that his name and credentials are being used fraudulently. So this is a much larger issue. The affidavit goes on to say that this is an ongoing alleged scheme, because then we go to January 17th, 2024. A fraudulent prescription was called into the Larry's Pharmacy in the Smithfield, Utah area. The prescription had been called in by the suspect identifying as the physician. The prescription was being called in for a female by the name of, you guessed it, Gwendolyn Cox. Slightly different spelling, though, and date of birth as the one at Spence's Pharmacy with the provided birthday of 1949. The prescription called in was listed as a Schedule 5 controlled substance. After receiving the request for the prescription, the pharmacy had found the call to be suspicious. Pharmacy attempted to contact the doctor again, but the phone number was disconnected. The pharmacy searched the practice on the internet for the physician and found that he was a medical provider in Provo. During the conversation with the physician, he stated that he does not have a patient by the name of Gwendolyn Cox and suggested that the prescription request was fraudulent. The physician had told the pharmacy that this has happened many times. The pharmacy then contacted law enforcement and provided the information. In addition, the pharmacy had also been in communication with someone who identified themselves as Gwendolyn Cox and that they were making arrangements for their grandchild to pick up the prescription. They described that Gwendolyn sounded as though they were a much younger person disguising their voice to sound much older. The phone numbers that the pharmacy had received calls from were later called by the pharmacy and found to be disconnected or not in service. So, what happened? Well, the affidavit states that a plan was devised to contact whoever arrived to pick up the prescription from Larry's Pharmacy. Two different females, later identified as known associates of Kentrell Galden, young boy, and will be referred to as known associate 1 and 2. They arrived at Larry's Pharmacy to pick up the prescription. They were detained for the investigation. They were later arrested for their role in a prescription fraud ring. But get this. Investigators say that young boy himself actually reached out to them pretending to be Gwendolyn. The investigator states in the probable cause affidavit, quote, during the investigation, I was contacted by dispatch and informed of a Gwendolyn Cox needing to speak with me. I contacted Gwendolyn at the phone number that she provided dispatch. During my conversation with Gwendolyn, she gave me the last name of White, then asked for the spelling of her name. Gwendolyn only gave me her birth month and date and could not provide her age to me. Gwendolyn also would not provide her address, though the address given to the pharmacy was a local address to Smithfield. Also, during the conversation with Gwendolyn, it was very clear that a fake voice was being used. Gwendolyn sounded as though she was a much younger male from the southern states. Gwendolyn made a statement, well, I asked her to, and she said that she'll have you call me. This statement was a response to a request that was made to have Gwendolyn contact dispatch and have them transfer her call back through. According to your affiant's training and experience and having lived in the southern United States, the terminology in replacing the word ask with ax or other variations is consistent with a southern dialect in states such as Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, and other southern states. So you can see how they believe this is young boy. The filing also gives details on how the two women were arrested in connection with the alleged fraud operation. It says that during the incident at the Larry's Pharmacy, known associates 1 and 2 arrived in a white Chevy Tahoe registered to Kentrell Galden out of Texas. During the investigation, the strong odor of marijuana emitted from within the vehicle. When both known associates 1 and 2 were confronted on the odor, they consented to a search of the vehicle. Residual flakes were found throughout the vehicle. They claimed that the vehicle was not theirs. During the communication with known associates 1 and 2, they continued to suggest that they were going to the pharmacy to pick up the prescription for a friend and would never give a name. It's also of value to note that when interviewing one of the females, they were asked who the prescription was for, and she said, Deborah Cox. Names are not adding up. A little inconsistent there. Well, now when these women were arrested, the SUV was taken to an impound, and young boy wanted to get it out, but the impound yard was reportedly suspicious, thinking that the car might actually be a stolen vehicle. So the investigators spoke with young boy and realized he recognized the rapper's voice. But investigators believe that based on the number of times they found prescriptions had been ordered or given out with fake names, young boy or whoever was behind this operation was likely trying to sell them. Through the aggregated amounts of and the amount of prescriptions known to have been successfully filled and attempted, your affiant has identified it as a distributable amount. Through evaluation of the fraud incidents, it is clear that there are numerous individuals involved to further the fraud scheme identified as an enterprise. The ongoing fraud and suspected distribution occurring between Kentrell Galden and his associates further substantiates the pattern of unlawful activity as they have engaged in at least 3 episodes of unlawful activity that are all similar in purpose, results, participants, victims, and methods of commission. You know what that says to me? Potential witnesses, potential people who may take deals to testify against young boy. That's something that came to my mind. Now, police served a search warrant on young boy's mansion on April 16th. Young boy and his guests were detained, and officers did an interview with young boy. The affidavit states that during the interview, Kentrell Galden was asked about the presence of firearms inside of his home. Kentrell Galden said that a gun belonging to his wife was in the home. Kentrell Galden was asked if he had ever handed the gun or if his DNA would be found on the firearm. He denied that the presence of his DNA would be found on the gun. However, he further described that 2 days earlier he had picked up the gun and moved it from an open area, placing it inside of a drawer. Kentrell Galden claimed that that was the only time he had touched the gun. He further described that his wife always has the gun within reach throughout the house. Now, remember, young boy isn't supposed to have access to weapons during his probation and pretrial house arrest. And also remember that he was currently on house arrest awaiting trial for federal gun charges for possession of a firearm by a felon because of that Louisiana music shoot incident. Well, now the gun in question here was found inside of his closet, unsecured, and where he would have had access to it. During the search of the residence, law enforcement found a prescription bottle in Kentrell Galden's bathroom inside of the master bedroom, identified as his. The prescription bottle was for Caroline White, one of the known fraudulent names with the corresponding prescribing doctor who had confirmed the fraud. Now they really have it tied back to him. Per the search warrant, all electronics were to be searched. A triage was being conducted as to not interfere with Kentrell's music business. However, Kentrell refused to give any passcodes for the devices. He answered, "Take it and break it," when I asked him for passwords for the devices. All devices were seized as they are suspected of containing communications that would provide further evidence of the identified ongoing criminal enterprise and the criminal actions occurring therein. The affidavit ends by saying, quote, according to the FBI, Kentrell is the known leader of a violent gang from the Louisiana area. Wow. Based on Kentrell's history, it is apparent that he is prone to violence. Based on the totality of the circumstances, a no-bail hold is requested to be placed on Kentrell, pending a detainer to be obtained by federal prosecution for his current case. Okay, what does all that mean? Well, young boy, he was arraigned on these charges last week with a pretrial release hearing set for April 29th. And at the time of this recording, it's our understanding that he is in the Cache County, Utah jail without bail. But it is our understanding that a Louisiana federal judge signed off on scheduling a hearing for his bond to be revoked for the federal case. Not surprising considering this arrest and new charges would most certainly be a violation of house arrest. So that means that if the state judge grants him pretrial release, he could potentially be taken into federal custody, that there would be no more house arrest, that he would be locked up while awaiting trial. We will see where this goes next.